Profit is unnatural. That's the first thing we have to understand. As soon as there's money there, there's a temptation to spend it. That's why most businesses make no money, and that's why most people are in debt and broke. When you have $50,000 in your bank account than when you have $5 in your bank account. You make different decisions. Everyone wants to have a ton of money, but we know what happens to the people that win the lottery. They end up back in the same position they were 10 years later, and they're broke again because they don't know how to manage the money. If you treat your business like a piggy bank, the business will end up broken like a piggy bank. You know, I am not in business for a good time. I'm in it for a long time. And so I make decisions with longer time horizons. Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Scott, and I've owned restaurants for almost 20 years. And now with OwnerShift, we help restaurant owners increase their sales, increase their profits, and increase their free time with their family, open up new locations, and all that good stuff. Today, I've got a special presentation, actually. I actually went through, built a presentation, and it's all about how to keep your money once you've made it, the 4 business rules to live by. So what's going to be great about this is we're actually going to dive into some real life scenarios, and I'll tell you how this came up. I'll tell you why I'm even starting with this video or why we're doing all this is because we actually had a client who started with us and never really made money in the restaurant business at all, worked too much, felt like he had to be there all the time, and just barely paid himself enough to live. Most of you guys can understand stories. You've heard stories like that if that's not your story. Anyway, so we helped him bring down his food and labor costs. We helped him get his business running much better. And so it's funny because he was one of our support calls. And what happened was he was just like, man, I barely need to be at the restaurant anymore. Like things run really well. Even when I'm not there, we've got more money in my bank account than I've ever had before. All my bills are paid. I've got more money at the end of the month. I'm able to take owner's draws out. I'm able to spend more time with my family. Everything is amazing. It would have never been possible without OwnerShift. And then 3 months later, I get a notification, like an internal notification from his coaching team. They're like, yeah, we've had to put this client on pause because he doesn't have enough money right now. Like he got behind on some of his food vendors. They called his 14-day credit and he had to pay it all back. Then he got behind on his sales tax and a bunch of stuff. And so I talked to the coaching team and I'm like, how in the hell did this happen? This guy literally, I saw the video like a couple months ago saying how amazing everything was. And then now he's not in that place. He's now at the point where it's like, he's running out of money. What the hell happened? And so we started to dive into what it was. And he actually committed some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. It wasn't that his business had changed, but basically he did a few of the things. And after we examined it, we realized that these are patterns. Once we help make people money, they fall into a few different things that they do that can ultimately land them right back in the spot where they started. So this episode or this training video, depending on where you're watching it, is designed to help you make sure you sustain the type of results and the success that you've had. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, if you're in a position where you haven't made money yet, probably not the podcast for you. Maybe go back and watch some of the earlier ones. But if you do have some money coming in and you're wondering, okay, how do I make sure I keep it? Then this is the one for you. And if you're one of our clients watching this is all designed around the same thing, how to make sure you sustain the results that you have. Let's dive in. Profit is unnatural. That's the first thing we have to understand. As soon as there's money there, there's a temptation to spend it. There's a temptation to get rid of it or to use it. That's why most businesses make no money, and that's why most people are in debt and broke. That's the average, right? There's a constant pressure as soon as you make the money, which is why someone needs to be there and actually hold the line and say, no, we are not going to spend that. No, we are going to keep it there. No, we are going to continue to make money. We're going to continue to do this instead of doing the easy thing. We're going to make more of it. We're going to make it grow. And so I wrote this down. I actually took some notes here. And one of it says, we're here to make big money, which requires big change. And the reason most small business owners stay small is that they don't do these types of things that you're going to talk about today. Most common mistakes that we see Most common mistakes is that restaurateurs, once they get some success, they think the good times are going to continue. And so I have an example of this. So everyone knows that in the stock market, you should buy when it's low and sell when it's high, right? That's what everyone should do. And we all know this. This is no surprise. But what do people actually do? People actually buy when it's high and they sell when it's low. They do the opposite of what they should. And why? Is because we think that whatever current state we are in or whatever the situation is going to continue. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. When the stocks are high, or you can use this to your crypto bros, when Bitcoin's up, everyone's like, yeah, to the moon, it's going to keep going up. Everything's going to be great. And so people buy more and buy more because they have this proof in the past that it has went up, right? So therefore, that will continue. But what we know is that almost everything is cyclical and there's ups and downs, but we think it's going to keep on going up. So therefore, we base all our decisions based on it continuing to go up. So we buy more. And then what happens is it starts to go down. And then that triggers a fear response where we say, oh no, it's going down. I don't want to lose. My current state is going to continue. So therefore, it is going to continue to go down. So I must sell now so that I don't lose money later because it's going to continue to go down. But of course, what actually happens is once you sell, typically it starts to go back up again. I swear it's a cycle. And that's what people don't understand is that your current state is not going to be your future state. If you're happy today, you know what? You could have a bad day tomorrow. Just because you're happy today does not mean every day from here on out will be good. So how does that affect us in business? It's that when we have made money and when times are good in business, we think, oh man, it's going to be like this forever. So therefore we spend differently. We make future decisions differently. We might buy a bigger house. We're going to do a few things like that instead of actually looking at what's probably going to happen is that, you know what, we're at a good time right now. Sometime in the future, it's probably not going to be as good. So therefore, we should save more and prepare for that. Yeah, we just think the good times are going to continue. Things are good right now. Amazing. Like I don't have any staffing challenges right now. Amazing. My staffing challenges are solved. So therefore, I don't need to continue to hire. But sure enough, you end up in an April situation or an August, September situation. There's always turnover during those times. And if you're not prepared for it, you're screwed. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people think. And the amount of clients that we have had over the years, they're like, man, things are great. I don't need you guys anymore. Only to come back 3 months later being like, yeah, we need to work with you guys again because we haven't maintained what we had. It happens so often. It's really frustrating because then we end up redoing all the work that we already did. So it just makes sense to actually just continue doing the right things. But anyway, thinking the good times will continue. That's one, letting go of the basics. It kind of that point that I just made. There's a great example about this. I'm sure you guys have probably tried to lose weight before. What did you do? You dieted. You're like, okay, I better not eat that dessert. I better not go and get seconds. I better exercise more. I better walk more. Maybe I'm going to go to the gym. You change those things. And then as soon as you're down like 10, 20 pounds and you're like super excited about it off of this diet you've done or this new exercise program you've done or whatever, what's the first thing you do? Oh man, like I've lost 20 pounds. I can do a cheat day. And then the next week you're like, yeah, I've only had one cheat day this week. I can do that extra dessert. And then the next week, you're like, oh, I don't have to go to the gym. I've been going like 5 times a week. And so pretty soon, you end up right back where you started because we've let go of the things that helped us be successful. It was one of the most common things. People normally are driven by their state where it's can't get any bigger than this, so therefore I must lose weight. Sometimes people will find us from a restaurant coaching perspective, and they come to us because they're like, I can't lose any more money. I need to make a change. And then we make them a little bit of money and the pressure's off, and then they go back and stop doing the things that help make them the money. So it's just recurring happens because it's a psychological thing. Like we're human. This is what happens when the pressure's off. We let go of the reins. We loosen all of that stuff, and we just can't because unless we want to go back where we were. And in that case, go ahead, loosen the reins. Another one is using your bank account as a gauge. And so here's what'll happen. People see a bunch of money in their bank account, more than they've ever seen before. What's the first thing they do is they're like, time to give myself a raise. Oh man, my business must be doing pretty good because therefore I've got money in my bank account. So yeah, I can take some out. I can spend, I can go and buy that thing. They use their bank account as a gauge as opposed to using a system and using their profit and loss statement, because guess what? Your bank account has a high and a low point every month, and even every quarter has a high and a low point, and every year has a high and a low point. But if you're only looking at week by week, you might be at the highest point you're going to be for that year and taking a whole bunch of money that you might need later. So that's another one that mistake people make. People also take big owner's draws where they increase their personal expenses. Once they start making some money, the first thing they do is start taking it out, buy a new car, they buy some toys, maybe they buy some new equipment, they give themselves a raise, they go on that vacation. And some of those things are good to do. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to not take a vacation. I don't want you to not do those things, but you have to understand that you need to be able to afford it, and your business needs to be able to afford that in order, before you do it. We can't have you take that vacation only for the next week to have you thinking about declaring bankruptcy, right? That just doesn't make sense. So we need to make sure that's there. And what we have to understand is that you make different decisions when you have $50,000 in your bank account than when you have $5 in your bank account. You make different decisions. And so that's the thing that we need to understand. Another one, pay off too much debt. So instead of taking the money and buying stuff or buying their kids toys or vacations or whatever thing is, they pay off a bunch of debt. But then, of course, if something turns in the business and your sales start to go down, or you enter into a lower season, which is commonly November, December, January, February for a lot of businesses, those are lower seasons for some of them. If you pay off a bunch of debt and then all of a sudden your sales go down and you need that money, you can't get it because you've already paid up extra loan payments and stuff like that. And another one is becoming absentee too quickly, which means, you just step back and you didn't have a leadership or a management team in place to be able to do it. Sometimes this happens when you open up a new location. And the other thing we see too is you don't have to be there. So therefore you take more time off and you don't replace the time that you've saved yourself with higher leverage time. So I'll give you a perfect example. So maybe you used to work the floor, maybe you used to be in the kitchen, then you saved yourself a salary by being there. Maybe you worked 30 hours a week on the floor and then worked another 10 to 20 hours on owner level stuff. So you saved yourself almost a full-time person. So then you step back because you don't need to be there, but you don't replace that time with anything that's higher value. It's just going to add to your labor costs. So the whole goal of what we try and get our clients to do is free up their time so that they can do higher leverage things. So they can focus more on marketing. So they can focus more on the financial stuff. If you're sitting there playing PlayStation, that's not adding that money to your business, right? We often ask our clients, where do you value your time? Most of our clients say they value it at nothing. So that's why they work so much on the floor, because they don't cost anything, which is not true, because there's an opportunity cost of the time you're not spending doing the things that'll grow the business. But then once you actually do free up the time, if you don't do the things that actually grow the business, your time is worth zero. So you actually have to free up your time and then do bigger, awesome stuff with it, not sitting at home on the couch watching Stranger Things. And I say that just because as I'm filming this, Stranger Things season 5 just came out. Anyway, cool. So those are the most common mistakes that happen, and I don't want any of you guys to do those, but I've seen these so many times, they are ingrained in my brain. So I just don't want you guys to do them. So what we're going to be covering is the 4 financial rules for your business. I talk about this as a system of guardrails because I did hear, there was this sermon I heard once and it stuck with me. And this is 25 years ago, but he was talking about guardrails and how he had guardrails in his marriage. He had guardrails in his work life. He had guardrails in his personal life. But the one he was using was more about his marriage. And one of the guardrails for him was that he would never be alone with another, I think it was he wouldn't be alone with an unmarried woman, or if he hired anyone to work closely with him, his wife had to approve it. Now, for some people, that might seem crazy. What do you mean you can't be alone with an unmarried woman or something like that? But he was guardrails suck and it's annoying, but it is better than driving over and going over the ditch and totally wrecking your car and dying. Hitting a guardrail and smashing up your fender or wrecking your paint job is better than the alternative. And so the reason he had those guardrails is so that he would never be in that position for something bad to happen that could be extremely detrimental. And so what I'm talking about today are more like guardrails. That's why they're there. These are tough. These are not fun. But the reason why we do it is so that we don't get a much worse thing. Because these guardrails are not good, right? But they prevent us from something way worse. So let's talk about that. So the first one is you want to pay your taxes at the earliest opportunity. Because realistically, if you're in a position where you are just having some profit now, you haven't earned the right to manage your money well enough yet. You don't have the experience. Everyone wants to have a ton of money, but we know what happens to the people that win the lottery. They end up back in the same position they were 10 years later, and they're broke again because they don't know how to manage the money. They got the money, but didn't have the skill to manage the money. And that's what we're trying to help you develop by talking about these guardrails. Restaurant owners, before you open more locations, stop. I've seen way too many owners go from 1 to 2 to 3 to bankruptcy. I know because I was once there myself. The difference in owning multiple locations is how you have to change, and if you don't make the shift, it'll take years to recover. I took my 3 biggest lessons and put them in a free ebook called the Multi-Unit Playbook so you don't have to go through the same struggles that I did. Go to the link in the description below and get your free copy today. So you want to pay your taxes at the earliest opportunity. So here's what happened to me. I'm the idiot that this happened to, so let's go through this. In my very first year of business, it was November, and I had to register with the government, and we had to do our sales tax. And so it said, how much revenue do you think you're going to have this year? And of course, it was November, and I'm like, and this year, not much, because there's only a month left or 2 months left or whatever. There's only a couple months left. So not much. And so I put down that amount, and they said, okay, based on your revenue, we'll get you to do an annual filing period. And I was like, cool, I didn't know any better. And so then I went through this whole year, never paid a tax installment, never did anything. And then I was on an annual filing period, and then all of a sudden we ended our next year, and then my accountant sent me an email. I was like, hey, here's the amount you have to pay the government. It was $50,000. My account was in overdraft at that time. And so I got that email, and I'm like, where the hell am I going to get $50,000? Like, how am I going to pay this? And he's like, you got to pay it, otherwise we're going to shut your business down. I'm like, what do you mean? I have like negative 5,000. Like, where am I going to find 50? I don't even own anything that I could even sell to get $50,000. I considered stripping, but no one wants to see that. So anyway, I'm kidding. I didn't actually consider that. But anyhow, moving on. What happened, I ended up having to make a payment plan with the government, and like it took me, I think that luckily they gave me like 7 or 8 months to pay this thing off. Not all tax people are that nice, but they gave me some time to pay it off, and I was able to pay it off, and that was great. Of course, by the time I paid it off, I had to start paying installments on the next one, but I did switch to a quarterly filing period. And to be honest, I should have went monthly, and that's what I'm telling you to do here. If you can do a monthly filing period for any of your taxes, do it. Smart financial people will be like, yeah, you should do quarterly because then you can put it in a savings account and get interest on the money that you would have paid the government. But the reality of what most people do is they never do that. They just keep it in their operating account, and they think it's free money, not realizing that it actually is owed to the government. It's not their money at all. So they take it and spend it. And then when it comes tax time, they're like, oh shit, I don't have any money. Well, that's what most people do. That's why I do not sure, it'd be nice to make a little bit of interest on it, but you're not that skilled yet. You're not that good yet. That's not for you. 10 years from now, you can look at that is not for you right now. What you need to do is pay it, because if you do not pay it, the alternative is they could freeze your accounts and shut your business down. Like, you do not want to go there. So you need to pay it at the earliest opportunity. If you can pay it monthly. I still make monthly installments towards my stuff, even though it's not annual. Sure, I'd take that money, make some interest on it or whatever. But I'm like, no, I don't want to risk it. I'm getting that money out of my hands because it's not my money to begin with. I'm getting it out of here because I don't want to have that potential risk of something happening later and me having to then make crazy decisions to try and pay something because I didn't plan properly. So I just take that out of my hands altogether. And I like to think I'm a pretty sophisticated and decent individual. I like to think I'm smart, but no, I still do this just so I don't end up in that place. So that's that. Next one, your operating account should have 3 months fixed expenses at its lowest point. To move on from that other point I just made about taxes. So when I file quarterly for sales tax, what I would notice is that about 2 months in, 2.5 months in, I would notice I would have a high. So if you actually look at your bank account, you notice that your rent comes out sometimes, your payroll will come out, your loan payments will come out. Sometimes they all come out in the same week. But I always notice that about the third week of the month is when I usually recouped and I had a high in my bank account. And then usually every third month, I would have the biggest high of the quarter in my bank account. And every time that happened, I felt great. I'm like, man, we got money. It's awesome. And then I paid my taxes and I'm like, oh, never mind. Never mind, I don't have that much money. So that's the reason why I encourage you to go monthly, because even that, and I knew that was a pattern. I knew what week I would have the highest bank account balance, and I knew what month I would have the highest bank account balance. And so I knew all of that and still was tempted to make improper decisions. So my point in this is your bank account has a high point and a low point. And so the low point is what we want to deal with, because we want to make sure that low point doesn't go below a threshold. So you want to take the low point, and that low point should have 3 months of your fixed expenses. So take your rent, take your loan payment, take your power bill, take your insurance, take whatever you got. And that should be the minimum you carry. Let's just say your rent's $5,000 and insurance and other stuff. Throw a couple of the $1,000 on there. So 7 times 3 is what, 21. So basically at that point, that should be your low point in your bank account, which means it can go higher than that, but it should be 21 at that point. Now just use that for whatever you have in business. And if you're in a position where you're like, Andrew, my bank account's currently sitting at $3,000, yeah, it's okay to take time to get up there. Make $5,000 your first goal, then make $10,000 the next one, then 15 until you get there. And so the reason why we want to have this buffer in your account is because guess what? Your walk-in's going to go down. Guess what? Equipment's going to need to be replaced. I've had to replace AC units in places that I rented. Those are not cheap. Those things are going to happen. You're going to have an unexpected tax bill that you weren't anticipating. You're going to have 3 payrolls. Like 2 months of the year, you have 3 payrolls in a month. Like you need to be able to plan for that stuff. And you need to be able to plan for rent and your loan payment and payroll all to come out in the same week. Like you need to prepare for those things, because if every time that one of those things happens, you end up freaking out because you have no money and you have to cut payroll and you have to make a whole bunch of rash decisions about stuff, and you're constantly operating in this place of stress, you don't make great business decisions when you're stressed like that. So you need to actually plan it out and have that as a buffer. So this is actually going to help you make better business decisions, because then you could literally go 3 months, like literally you could lock the doors of your business and not take in any money for 3 months, and you would still be okay. You would still have enough money. That gives you incredible flexibility to weather a storm. That means you could probably have 6 months of down sales and you could just use a little bit as you go and you'd be fine. Right? Like you would then have time to fix whatever problem your business hands you. Most of the time, we just don't have enough of a buffer because we're not strong enough not to take it early and do all sorts of stuff with it. That's what I need you guys to understand. But now, until you have this in place, what I believe is that you should only be paying yourself the bare minimum that you need to survive. So let's just say, like back in the day, my rent was like, I don't know, $1,400 or something like that. And I had to pay my car insurance and stuff like that. So I paid myself like $1,500 to $2,000 a month. That's what I paid myself. That's what I could pay myself. This is again back in my first location, but that's what I paid myself for a couple of years. Like I paid myself right around that. I think it was like $12,000 to $15,000 a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. So yes, that's less than $2,000. But anyway, it was a really lean year that year. So that's what I paid myself. It was the bare minimum because I knew I needed to put money in my bank account. I knew I needed to put it in the business bank account. The business needed it. So that's what I had to do. And I paid myself the bare minimum. And so that's what you should be doing if you have less than 3 months expenses saved up as a buffer from your low point in your account. All right. So now once you've achieved this, once you have your buffer set up in your operating account, next you need to have an emergency fund. You have no doubt heard of this, whether it be from Dave Ramsey or someone else, some other personal financial person. You need to have a emergency fund. Guess what? Your business needs one too, because like I said, unexpected tax bills, equipment repairs. It's not if something bad's going to happen, it's when something bad is going to happen. So those who fail to plan to fail. So we need to make sure that you have the preparations for that. You're ready for it because it will happen. So how I suggest you do this is have a separate account where you can collect some interest. Now, usually the banks want to give you the least amount possible. Usually it's like 1% of interest or less, whatever. You can collect a little bit of money on it, try and keep up with inflation with that money, but you want to have that sitting in an emergency fund. And so we want to aim for about the same amount, which is about 3 months fixed expenses. So again, if you don't have that yet, aim for 5,000, then aim for 10,000, then aim for 15,000. So again, make your goals as you go up. Now, this is your safeguard. Yeah, no, here's how I have used this in the past for me. Just imagine. I had to buy a whole new make station, like a sandwich table. I had to buy a whole new one, and they were something like, I don't know, $6,000 or something like that. And normally $6,000 in my earlier days would have floored me. That would have put me out of business. But in this case, I had an emergency fund. So I'm like, okay, $6,000 I need to pay to bring this in. Okay, I'm going to take half of it from my operating account, and then the other half I'm going to move in from my emergency fund. So it softens the blow a little bit on my operating account because I had the money in emergency fund ready to go and ready to be brought in. So half it came from the operating account, half it came from my emergency fund. And then I was able to build up my emergency fund again over the next few months. And so it was good. It didn't impact me at all. I didn't have to make any crazy decisions. I didn't have to go and work a few 80-hour weeks to try and save some money. I didn't have to let people go. I didn't have to do anything, right? I could manage it because I had planned appropriately for it. How amazing is it to have a big pile of money sitting there and you can just transfer it in? Like, how amazing is that to be able to navigate any of your unexpected expenses? All of a sudden, those big expenses, they don't seem so bad. You're not as stressed. Like, life is good. Most people don't do this. Most people, like I said, they don't have an emergency account, emergency fund. They just take the money, pay themselves, or they pay down a whole bunch of debt, and then all of a sudden something happens. They end up right back where they started. So it's not an if it happens, it's a when. Yeah, and this is also where you can save up for things like a brand new location. So that's important to understand too. All right, so now we've established that you need an operating account with a buffer and an emergency fund with a buffer. So how do you actually get those things? What's the plan? What do I do? So here are the basic rules that you need to understand. And the cardinal one is don't overpay yourself. But actually, I don't know if so don't overpay yourself, but also don't overpay your debts and stuff like that either. So let me just walk you through how I have done this in the past and how I navigate these types of things. So here we go. Number one, you just start with the bare minimum you need when you're paying yourself, right? So that's where you just pay yourself to cover your expenses. This is the first thing that I mentioned, right? If you don't have a buffer in your operating account, you don't pay yourself more than what you absolutely need. This amount should not be more than what you pay a manager. Oftentimes it's far less than that. If you're absentee, so as in you're not working in the business, this amount should be zero until you get that set up. So you shouldn't be paying yourself anything unless you're actually doing something in the business and providing value. That's the way I look at it. Now, here's the caveat to all this is you actually need to budget personally. If you treat your business like a piggy bank, the business will end up broken like a piggy bank. You know, your personal financial decisions can destroy your business the same way your business decisions can destroy your personal financial situations. That's why we're putting these rules and guardrails in place. A funny story about how I did this, because I also am interested in personal finance and wealth and stuff like that. And so I was reading this book and it's like, yeah, you got to pay yourself first. And I'm like, man, I'm not doing that at all. I'm barely paying myself anything. You got to pay yourself first before you pay your bills, and pay yourself first before you got to do your investing first and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I set up some mutual fund contributions, and I set that up to happen weekly. And I picked the ones I wanted. I started taking money out of the business to fund it. And sure enough, 3 months later, we ended up having a bad month where sales went down, which was totally predictable, by the way. Then sure enough, what did I have to do? I had to sell the mutual funds. Of course, they had went down when I went to sell them. So I lost money on doing that. So I just learned my business needs to be solid enough before I actually start doing all this other stuff and investing for myself. And this is just because otherwise I'm just going to end up taking it out at the wrong time because I'm going to need the money. The same way if you pay off too much debt, if you pay yourself too much and buy stuff, you go and buy yourself a nice purse or a nice watch or whatever, you might need that money again. You might not be able to get it, or it might be worth less than what it was. Maybe you go and buy a watch and you sell it, and all of a sudden someone's only going to give you 70% on it because it's used now. Anyway, point is, you have to make sure that You keep track of that. You can't overpay yourself. So once you get your operating account done, like once you get the buffer in place, then what I suggest is you give yourself a 50% raise. So let's just say you've been paying yourself a couple grand. All right, then you make it $3,000 a month. I get not anything to write home about, but again, use this for your own business and stuff like that. Adjust those numbers accordingly. It's just an example. But give yourself a 50% raise. And then usually what happens is when you hit your emergency fund goal, then you give yourself another raise to double what you were paying yourself originally. So that's your basic salary. And again, these are smaller numbers, but they're designed to be smaller numbers because there's going to be other ways we're going to start doing some draws, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. So that's just your base salary. And at kind of the max, what you'd want to do is you would want to give yourself a salary of what you would pay someone else to do the same job that you're doing. So say if you're functioning as a restaurant manager, pay yourself like a restaurant manager. If you're functioning as a regional manager, pay yourself as a regional manager. Like that should be the max that you do. You shouldn't be paying yourself 200 grand a year just because you're a business owner, right? Like you should only be paying yourself what the business can afford to pay you, which is the concept that we're really trying to drive home here. That if you need to make more money personally, then well, you need to get your business to make more money, right? And so you can't just pay yourself from the business more than what it can afford, because then your business is eventually going to go under and you're not going to have any income at all. I've seen this way too many times. I need to pay myself more. Maybe you need to budget better. Maybe you need to actually look at your personal finances until your business can afford to pay you that way. It doesn't necessarily happen at the start. Anyway, so taking owner's draws is really important that we follow a specific procedure for it. So again, until you've met your operating account goal, you should not take a draw above what you've been paying yourself. But once you've hit that and we're building the emergency fund, obviously you've already given yourself a raise, but here's how we decide to take draws monthly. Here's the rules that I put in place. I take the profit on the P&L, I subtract any loan payments or taxes that I haven't paid yet. And so let's say the profit on the P&L was 10 grand. And I take out my loan payment, maybe that's $3,000, and maybe there's a couple grand of taxes I owe, so that's $5,000 that's left. That's actually mine, because again, that loan payment doesn't show up on your P&L, right? The principal repayments doesn't show up on your P&L. The interest does, but not the principal. So we don't want to make ourselves cash poor in our business. So we subtract that. And then we take out the amount of taxes that are there. We want to prepay those. So once we've done that, we've got $5 grand left in this example. So 50% of that amount stays in the business account. And I'll tell you why in a little bit, but 50% stays, that's $2,500. And then out of the remaining $2,500, 25% goes to the emergency fund and 25% to you as a bonus. So basically it's split up. We subtract everything, and then out of the bonus that's left, so again, out of the 10,000 minus the loan payments gives us 5,000. So out of that, half stays in the business account, and then a quarter goes to you, and a quarter goes to build the emergency fund. This kind of rewards yourself for doing good things, but also builds the emergency fund at a time and helps you build the basic business operating account. And I'll tell you why that's going to happen in a minute. Is the other rule that I put in place is called a bank account bonus. This is whenever your bank account hits a new high, I would normally take out about $5,000 and I would split it evenly between you and the emergency fund. So an example of this, and this is really exciting when I used to do it. So again, we know we have our basis covered. We have a minimum threshold of 3 months expenses, right? So let's just say that your minimum is $20,000 in your operating account. Let's just say that now it normally hovers around 30, 35,000. So I'd say when it hits 40,000, boom, take out $5 grand, half for you, half for the emergency fund. It starts building the emergency fund, right? And then all of a sudden, when you get up past 40 and it gets to 50, boom, take another $5 grand, right? Another half for you, another half for the emergency fund. When it gets to $60,000, take out another 5. And you just keep on doing this. So you can reward yourself by a couple things, from the amount on your P&L when you make money and when your business account grows and gets to a certain point. And eventually you can start taking out more. So once you get up to double your fixed expenses, then take out 10 grand every time you get a new one and put more towards the emergency fund. And eventually when the emergency fund is fully stocked and you've got your 3 months of expenses, then you can take the rest of it. Then you can either start saving for a new location, or I'd recommend if you have debt, I would put half towards the debt, half towards you once you've got the emergency fund built up. But these are two ways that not only one, you get a salary, which is great. That's a way to consistently pay yourself, consistently manage your bills. So that's awesome. And then you start taking money when you make money every month on your P&L. And if you don't make money, then you don't pay yourself anything. So then you got to fix the problem in the business, right? But then when your business account grows far beyond, when it hits a new high, take out some extra money and reward yourself. I always used to love those days. When I saw my bank account was a new high, boom, wrote myself a check and boom, $2,500. It was great. And then I could do whatever I wanted with it. And I just loved those days because then I was rewarded by making my business more profitable and doing better, all without sacrificing the potential future of my business by making short-term decisions. And when I took the money, there was no guilt associated with it because I knew my business was covered. Like there was a point where I probably had way too much cash just sitting there. And again, that's a different story, but we just got to the point where I didn't have to worry about anything. I could have went through like a year of a downturn or 2 years of a downturn, wouldn't have fazed me a bit because we had the resources and we could then get the flexibility to solve the problems. So I know this is not what anyone wanted to hear because usually when people are like, yeah, I'm making more money, my bank account's growing, no one wants to say, no, you have to leave it there and you have to do that. You can't take it out and spend it. I hate to be that guy, but this is what will save your business from going right back to where it started. This is what will save your business from being in a place where you'll have to make rash decisions again. And let's face it, you've just worked so hard to get out of the place that you were in. You don't want to go back there. So these are the new skills you have to learn on how to keep the money and how to make sure you set up the guardrails and safeguards for you so that you never go back there, so that you can have a very sustainable business. Because I am not in business for a good time. I'm in it for a long time. And so I make decisions with longer time horizons. I need to make sure that I set things up so it's going to last 10, 20, 30 years, right? If you want your business to only last a few years, then no need to plan for this, right? If you plan on going out of business and have nothing left over and going bankrupt and whatever, then don't follow any of this. But if you want to have a business that's sustainable, if you want to grow something real that can eventually be passed to your kids, like one of the number one reasons that businesses go out of business because they run out of money. They run out of cash. They cannot meet their obligations, so therefore they close. And so most of the time it's because something happens in whether it's the economy or in the business or whatever that happens, and they didn't have enough cash or liquidity to keep them operating while they fix that problem. And so they went under. That's why businesses fail, right? Because they run out of cash. And so knowing that, we need to be very cautious with our cash. We need to preserve it because doing so will then help us preserve our business. So I'm going to end off with this. It is easier to make money than to keep it. This requires a new plan and a new skill. And if you put in place the things that we talked about today, I think you'll be in a much better place. And I certainly hope your business will be sustainable for the future and you'll have more money than you know what to do with, so long as you manage it. All right, guys, I hope this is helpful and we'll see you soon.